What's going on, everybody? HipPaw's back for the next part of this tutorial. And in the next part, we're going to get these textures out of here and get it into UDK and see if we can't recreate how it looks here as best as we can. So let's start. I'll go ahead and pull this down just a little bit. And I'm going to export channel to PSD. I'm already in the same folder. So this is going to be HuntingRifle scope diffuse. I'm just going to go ahead and overwrite that. Yes. Takes a second, and it should pop right over to Photoshop. Alright. Get Photoshop into view here. Okay. That looks good. And now we'll do the specular. Spec. Alright, there she blows. And last but not least, the bump map. Rush. Okay, so first things first, let's get the specular over to our model. So we just get rid of the base mesh, go to channels, hold control, drag this up here and then in here and hold shift and let go. Dump the alpha channel and apply. Okay. Don't exactly know what I'm going to be looking at yet, so I'm going to just leave it as is and we'll get it into UDK lickety splits so that we can see what the hell we're looking at. So let's see, recent places. HuntingRifle textures, HR scope diffuse, that is fine, and we do need the alpha channel, so 32-bit. Okay, the bump map should be pretty basic, so I'm just going to make a dupe of this layer. Filter X normal, height to normals. You could use anything to make these. Crazy bump, the DDS tools from NVIDIA or anything. You get roughly the same results. I believe Crazy Bump gives you better results, just FYI. I've never tried it though. So let's go here and scope, and this will be normal map. Doesn't matter if I have alpha channels checked. If I throw 24-bit on here, it wipes the alpha channel out. Okay, so I need to open Max and UDK, so I'll pause for that. Okay, I got Max open here, and here's the original rifle. So if I take a look here, I got these two things selected, right? So the idea is, now this may or may not be different for you, but the scope on my rifle will be an attachment. It will be able to be earned or taken off or upgraded or blown off or whatever. It's just going to be a separate mesh. So I haven't actually, just FYI, I haven't done any kind of setup yet for the model to be animated, to be located correctly in the player's hands. Obviously the scale's wrong as well. That's inconsequential at this stage. It's a hugely important thing, don't get me wrong, but at this stage, it doesn't matter. I'm still just working with the materials. The shapes of the mesh and everything won't change. If I scale them up and down, it's no big deal. But I do want to scale it before I actually bring in like a skeletal mesh. However, I just want to point out that I'm not going to have an issue scaling it after the fact if I need to, because the bone type that I'm going to use for this weapon is going to be pyramid objects. Okay, I'm not going to use actual bones. Max has issues with actual bones and scaling those. It's not a UDK problem, it's not an export problem, it's a Max thing. Okay, if you scale them, it like doesn't come in. I guess it's a combo of export and Max, but Max does not like allow for scaling, so you just got to keep that in mind. Now the other thing too is that this scope has the separate mesh here for the well, it's not a separate mesh, but it's the separate UVs for the actual for the lens here. So what I'm going to do is just quickly set that up. Okay, and I just need that to be on ID 2. Okay, so I'm going to right click to set it to 1 and then go to 2, and then I'm going to hit Control I to make that opposite and right click so that everything else is on ID 1. Okay, so I'm basically reset here. I also don't really care that it's not exactly at the origin or anything like that. I'll be aligning everything later. That'll probably be a completely separate video, that whole setup. So let's take this guy, and the other thing I got to make sure I do too is come here and actually I'm going to hit Control I, and I'm just going to drag any one of these other materials to it. Okay, so that way if I were to sample in a new spot here, I should get 2 here. And I'm just going to go ahead and rename it differently. So I'm just going to call this body, and I'm going to call this one lens. And it doesn't matter what texture I put in there. What matters is that they have different maps in the material. Okay, even a checker can work, I think. I'm not sure. I might have to throw a texture in here instead of the checker pattern, but we'll see what we get when we throw it in UDK. Okay, so I just go to textures because I know that's a good folder, and then I go to ASC. So I'm going to call this HR scope scale test. Okay, so for hunting rifle scope scale test. Okay, let me pop open UDK because I actually forgot to do that. These are the paintable versions that I got over here. They're kind of like not lined up with each other, but it doesn't really matter. I'm keeping them here for now. I can delete them at any moment, but just in case I do need to, and I still actually have the OBJ, so you know what, F it, I'm just going to dump them. I really don't need them. Combined together, I'm looking at 5,800 polygons. It's well within my budget. It's just a little over half of what I had set as any kind of max. So it should be fine here. And I'll just wait for a second for UDK. I'm just going to kind of inspect the alpha channel here just to see if I expect any issues. I may actually get some issues because one of the things I was kind of wanting to do was probably I need to dull out the gloss map on the scope body itself and keep a relatively high gloss on the metal brackets and rail and stuff. But this will have a high specular, but it'll have a low gloss value, and it's going to be really difficult for me to do that, to be perfectly honest. So I may or may not need another map. But the good news is I can do like a gloss mask and throw it in the alpha for the normal map, because UDK can in fact support normal maps with alpha channels. It's just a specific type that you got to worry about. Alright, so UDK is open. It was full screen before. Let me get it into view really quick. Okay, and I'll pull this down a little bit. Alright, so I'll go to my weapons. Okay, hunting rifle. Let's go ahead and fully load that. Okay, notice how UDK keeps doing that to me. It keeps moving my list every time I touch it. I've seen other people where that doesn't happen to them, and I spend an awful lot of time fiddling with this list. It's really, really aggravating. I'm gonna say it again. Okay, what the I'm just going to click something so it doesn't hopefully do that again. Okay, so hunting rifle here, textures. Alright, so import recent places, hunting rifle textures, scope, open. Okay, so the scope diffuse, keep it default because it does have an alpha, and I do want it on the default compression style. It's a 2048, which might be a little high for a scope, but I'm keeping it as is for now. Check how it lags or anything like that. It shouldn't lag, but if there's any issues, it's so easy to just drop it down to a 1024. It doesn't make a difference. Okay, so it's the normal map, so it's not got an alpha. Now if it does have an alpha, I'd uncheck that, and I would change this, instead of TC normal map, I'd use TC normal map alpha, and then the alpha channel will actually come in. So in this case, I'm not using one yet. I do anticipate having to need one though at this point. I think. I don't know. We'll see. Kind of hard to tell. Okay, and let's go ahead and get our mesh. So the scope. Okay, let's take a look. It looks okay. Let's make sure we've got two materials, and we do. Okay, I've got material 2 here for the rear, and what I can actually do is I've got a material that I've already created. Okay, and what it is just like a reflection of light. Real simple. Okay, now my main material I haven't made yet, so let's go back here to mesh. Let's clear this. I'll go ahead and actually, I need to come to textures, and I'll just highlight the, actually this can kind of speed things up. If you have two textures you need to bring in, just copy one of them to the clipboard and create the material off of the other. Okay, so I'm just going to do that. Put this in materials and hit okie doke. Okay, you can double click and bring this here, and immediately hit Control W to make a copy of it, and then just come right down here and paste in the name that I had copied to the clipboard, which is my normal map. Now I also want to have the scope model in view, so we just pop that in there like so. First things first, diffuse, spec, and normal. Now the scope is probably a little tiny. You can see the other materials actually applied. It might be a little bit difficult for me to fiddle with it here, but right now it's actually not too shabby. I mean, just straight up like that, it doesn't look overly awful or anything. So I'm just going to keep that for now. I may play with it later. To be honest, the reason that I kind of hesitant to do it is just because I'm in such a tight little space here. It's so hard to work in like this, trying to record and everything. Normally I'd like to do that kind of like that kind of thing full screen. So we'll just get the material, and we'll go ahead and pop that on. Boom, and just click off of it so it's not all blue and glowy. The normal for the dips here really didn't come through that well. Okay, I really would have liked those to be a little bit more powerful, to be honest. So that would be one thing that I would like to fix. So I'll dump this layer. Bumps. Okay, it's this part here, and you see the opacity was 28% because that's what tuned it nicely inside of Mudbox. But what I'm actually going to do is set that to 100% and see what we get. Okay, so Control Alt Shift and E to make a dupe, and I can just hit Control F now to reapply my last filter, and then resave. TGA, recent places. Okay, 24-bit. That's done. Let's go ahead and re-import that. Should take a sec, at the very least. Yeah, I think I like that a little bit more. It's a little bit more powerful. Okay, and that's kind of one of the wondrous things about keeping your shit on different layers, right? So you can adjust them separately. All right, everything actually looks pretty decent so far. I'm just gonna go ahead and I think I'm gonna stick with it for now. Alright, the other thing I wanted to do was under mesh here, I can't remember I screwed this up, so I'm going to go ahead and move or rename these, which is right here, and I'm just going to move them into textures, okay, and just hit OK to all. It will associate the material and everything, okay, so I'll be fine. Like if I go to the material now and I check the hunting rifle material, you'll actually see that it did move it here. You can see textures right there. Okay, so it's no longer in .mesh there. The other thing is that I wanted to hunting rifle and the normal map. I just wanted to re-import just in case there was anything. I believe I made a change. I can't fully remember. I know I added the mag thing to it, but I don't think I changed anything on the normal map, so it might tell me that it's not needed. If it's not, I'll just cancel that. But definitely the hunting rifle itself was. Okay, so that's good, and I'll just save the package. Boom! And like I said, I mean, it looks fine to me right now without having to go in and do a bunch of lerps and you know, fernals and reflections and all that crap. I'll need to see it in game, holding it and shooting it and everything, before I can really truly make any kind of decision. But at this stage right now, I actually think it's fine. So well, the good news about that is we're just gonna go forward with basically setting up the skeletal mesh and the pickup mesh and all that stuff. It should be quite easy, I hope. Alright, so that's all saved. I could bring the scope into the editor here just for fun. This, I guess it's too big or too close. I need to get a better thumbnail. So if I throw it in the world and then I scale it up and just kind of take a peek. You know, the bumps are there. It's a little less bumpy on here than it looked inside of Mudbox, so I may or may not want to edit that. Let's look at the other side. It's not horrible. Okay, the specular does travel across the right surface. It's not fully black. It might be might feel a little too dirty. There might be some stuff that I do want to edit on it, but I think at this point I'm actually fine. By the way, this does have a weird normal map on it, just kind of break it up. Alright, so good news there. I don't want to save the map, but I'll save that thumbnail. Oh, well, guess not. I don't save like a douche. Okay, so here we are back in 3-Die Studio. Now, I'm going to name these. Okay, that's rifle, that's scope. That is bullet 1. Just keep clicking until I get the other bullet. There we go. Bullet 2. Okay. A mag is all part of the rifle, so I don't care. This reference I had for the bullet, I can delete that. I can come to my layer explorer and show my reference, unfreeze it, delete it. In fact, what's still on here? Stock original. Go ahead and delete that. It might seem a little dangerous. For some reason, I can't delete. Okay, there we go. So I got bullet 2, mag paint. Okay, yeah, I did. Let's see, the mag paint was a duplicate, so I don't need that. Scope, bullet 1, rifle, bullet 2. That's all I need. So I'm going to go save as, and I'm going to call this, actually going to change the whole name. This is going to be hunting rifle setup. And I usually call it setup, and sometimes I'll do _UDK just to determine that. Okay, so that's fine there. Now I'm going to need to get this guy into the player's hands. So I actually have some animations already here with my character, right? With my rat. He just kind of pulls a pin here, gets ready with the grenade. So, but this isn't actually the one I want to do. I have a 50 caliber sniper, and I'm going to do the one player first. So I'm going to do idle here. Okay, and if I look, this is the 50 cal sniper that we've already got in the game with the arms, right? So what I want to do is actually come here. There is a root bone for this weapon right there. So what I can do is I can select that root bone, hit control page down, it gets all of its children, and I can delete it. I can also take the mesh and delete that. Now I have raw, just my arms. And I'm going to right click, I'm going to say unhide all, and I'm going to unfreeze all, and I'm going to unhide all again. And what the hell's going on up here? Let's see. Just going to check my layers and see if there's anything weird, and it doesn't look like it. It's all the bones. There's no object 01 or anything like that. So now I'm going to save this scene. Save as. Okay. So I got a player. I put all my animations in player animations. Okay, so I'm going to make a new folder here. So hunting rifle, and I'm going to call this anims. Okay, and this is going to be hunting rifle one player idle. Alright, now I need to bring in my actual rifle. So what we do is we go to import, just wait a sec, and then hit merge. And this is how you can bring items from one thing to another. So I believe that because I named, I think I have the, yeah, I'm kind of in the wrong. So I'll just nav to it. Sometimes it's like, oh, I've got, my export animations and then there's a hunting rifle folder in there. Then I've got my max setup scenes and there's a hunting rifle folder in there. As soon as I go to either one of those hunting rifle folders, the recent places overwrites it because it's the exact same name. It doesn't care. So just keep that in mind. You may want to do hunting rifle _max, hunting rifle _UDK or UE4, whatever you're going to use. And weapons, and hunting rifle should be in here somewhere. Scenes, I called it Winchester 700. Hey, well, I guess I could have gone there, right? Okay, so this setup here, hunting rifle setup. Okay, and I want all three elements. Bada boom. I'm just going to use the scene material because I don't give two squats. And you can see here that it's relatively large. It's rather large. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this layer rifle mesh. Okay, I did not want to do that. So now I've got that set up here. So what I can do too is come here, and I'm just going to hide everything else. And I didn't want to put it there either. It's just like it wants to dock everywhere. Okay, so rifle mesh is all by itself. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit Control A, and I'm going to deselect the rifle, and I'm going to link everything to it for now. Boom. So that way I can just control the one item for now. Okay, now I can unhide this. And now I want to get it in his hands. And again, it's friggin' huge compared to his hands. It's absolutely ginormous. So the good news is I can scale it down, everything goes with it. I don't exactly know how much I want to scale it. But what I need to do is take a look at how it's going to fit in the trigger and everything. Now I'm actually going to move the pivot to the trigger point here. Okay, and the reason for that is because now I can just kind of go like this, you know. Now this feels like it could be a little small, so let's pull it up just a little bit. See, I need that balance between this hitting his thumb, his fingers being able to wrap around it, and his finger being able to get to the trigger. And this right here looks to be pretty much correct. If it's good in his hand, I'm sure the other hand will fit fine too. So that's good. So now that I've got my scale good, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate it and put it back where it was, and now I'm going to hide the main mesh. So now here's what I want to do. If you look, if I hit my scale tool, I came down to 73.5%, right? So what I want to do is I want to collapse that. Now I'm going to show you guys the issues with scale, just so you know. I have everything linked to it, okay? So I'm going to select everything, I'm going to come here, and I'm going to say reset scale. Now if I look at this, the scale's 100%. But if I look at this, it's still 73.53. If I look at the bullets, they're still 73.53, okay? So what you actually have to do before you reset scale is unlink everything, then reset it. And now you can see 100%, 100%, and the bullet 100%, okay? So that is good. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, I just want to check everything else. So, and just to be safe, I'm actually going to come here and I'm going to say reset Xform, reset selected, and then I'm going to hit Control-Shift-P, which is my hotkey for turning everything back into an editable poly. Okay, again, if you want to set that hotkey, customize user interface, convert to editable poly is on there. You set whatever hotkey you want. Okay, so that is good. Just for shitsels, I guess. Not that it really matters, but there's nothing really stopping us from showing this. By the way, you do want to actually turn this stuff to none and no pre-multiplied alpha, and then boom. So now it actually, you know, looks like the rifle, and I'll just dupe this over here and I'll call this scope. Oh, rifle, and that's rifle. This is scope, and all I got to do is swap images. Drag that there. Okay, so it looks better. You know, I feel better about that. I might as well see it as is. And now I need to set up some bounds for where everything's going to go. So first off, and this is a one-player idle, right? I'm actually going to go ahead and save. But I'm also going to save as where are my player UK exports. I'm going to go back to weapons here, Winchester 700. I'm going to override the rifle setup because I have a better scale now. Now remember, I still have the modeling files. I still, you know, I save in stages. Save as at several stages can be safe. You want to be safe. Okay, so this is my setup file. But I'm going to go ahead and reopen the one-player idle. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to go ahead and stay and do this on my setup file. Okay, even though the mesh is in this scene, I tend to not have the mesh, the arms and stuff in this scene when I do this. So, pyramid time. Hold Control just to make it even, and it really doesn't matter the size. I'll just go 1 by 1 by 3. Okay, and I'm going to name this B_weapon root. I'm going to put it to 0, 0, 0, and I'm going to rotate it to 0, 0, 0. Okay, making sure that I'm on view. Because here's the thing: if I rotate it like this, notice I'm at 32 degrees. But if I put this on local, it's in relation to itself, which it's always going to be perfectly in relation to itself. Local should always show zeros here for the most part. Okay, so just keep this on view, or world, same thing. All right, now what I want to do is, that's the basically it's a good spot. It's right at the trigger guard, but this is not exactly where the gun is going to be. Okay, I need another bone. And actually, what I'm going to do, to be honest with you, I'm just going to move this completely out of the way, and I'll show you guys why it's going to make sense. And what I'm going to do is make a copy of this, and I'm going to call this B weapon movement. Okay, this one's going to go to 0, 0, 0 because that's where my trigger guard is. Or, yeah, that's, you know, where I want the pivot of the gun to be able to turn. Okay, it's like center of rotation. Okay. With that done, make a dupe of that, just holding shift. It's a copy. This is going to be, I no longer need to prefix weapon, B underscore scope, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to align it to the scope. Pivot to pivot and axis. Okay, so that's where the scope is going to attach. It goes right to this object's pivot. Now, I need to get one for the bolt pull. Now, the bolt pull is going to be a bit of a trick because I don't know where the center is of this object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here, let's hit F4 so I can see what's going on. I'm going to hit 5. I'm going to take this element here and I'm going to detach it. And I'm going to call this bolt. Actually, I'm going to call it HR underscore bolt. I'm probably going to reattach it, but for now, just gonna, and not to element, not as clone. I want it gone from the rest of the weapon, and I'm gonna isolate it. Okay, and really, all I gotta do is take these faces, hold shift, just drag them forward, clone to object. Okay, now I can unhide everything, take the weapon, and reattach the bolt. Okay, take this mesh here, effect pivot only, and just center to object. Okay. Now if I rotate this, it's a clean rotation. Max does a great job of finding the center. So now all I got to do is make a dupe of this, copy. I'm going to call this B underscore bolt, and I just got to align it to that. And it doesn't matter really how far forward it is. I'll just put it there. And I can pretty much delete that. Also, I can make another one here, roughly right there, and I'm going to call this bolt lock. Okay. The trigger, I'm pretty much going to want to do this by hand, just manually figure out where I want this to go. So the trigger is going to be here, so be trigger. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make it smaller. So I'm going to say like 0.2 by 0.2 by 1, so it's smaller. And I want it to stay at 0, 0, 0, but I want it to, let's look better. So I'm going to come here and say effect object only and snap to angle and just bring it down 180. So it's still at 0, 0, 0, but the object mesh, okay? So now I can say click the trigger, you know, go like that. And here's the thing though, I need to get the rotation in a good spot. So pretty much what I tend to do is stick it in the front of the trigger. If I'm really, really concerned, I'll come in close. If I'm super concerned, I'll snap it to the verts, but it's not going to make a difference. Number one, you're even going to hardly notice the thing, so number two, it just won't make a difference. Okay, the bullets, I pretty much only need one, but there's going to be two visible. Like one will be kind of sunk in the mag. It might actually be wise for me to include two bullets in the actual skeletal mesh because it will kind of help. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'll take the trigger and I'll duplicate that, and I'm just going to call this bullet 1. Okay, and I'm going to isolate these guys here. And what I'm going to do is make the bullet be a little bit bigger. I'll say maybe 2. And I'm going to align it to the bullet here. Okay, I'm going to go to Object Only and just bring it forward. Okay, and looking at F3 here, I can pretty easily select it. Okay, the reason that I make it bigger is because if it's too small, like that becomes, you know, like now I'm gonna keep clicking on the mesh, it's gonna be a pain in the ass, so I just make it bigger than the bullet. Okay, bullet 1, make a dupe. Bullet 2, and align it to the other bullet. Okay, so I got 2 bullet bones. They can be anywhere along this length. If I want to have them be in a better center of mass, what I can do is go here, get rid of this, get rid of everything, and do pivot to center in the X, which they pretty much already were, but just in case they weren't. So like if I move them way back here and I align them here, now they're centered. Okay, based on the overall length, the volume of the whole thing. Now if I wanted to center it just here, I could just do that by eye if I really wanted to, but it doesn't matter at this point. You know, I'll have full control. So okay, so I got my bullets, I got my weapon movement. What is this? That's the bolt. Okay, the bolt, what I'm thinking is having it go forward 90, and what I'm going to do is make it a little bit wider, no, a little bit depthier, like that, and then I can kind of go like that. So it's just, I want to be able to grab the thing, right? The plastic piece, it's still at 0, 0 because, again, I'm affecting the object only. The plastic piece I'll just pull to the back. Okay, and maybe I want to, like, a little bit less intrusive there. Okay, the weapon movement, I'm going to rotate forward. Okay, and I'm also going to do the same thing with the root. So you know, it's just a visual thing. It doesn't change anything. I haven't changed the way the pivot is aligned. And the last bone I need, I think it's the last one I need, is the mag. So really the mag is going to be pretty easy to align. Okay. In fact, what I can do is just kind of like align it to the bullet. Okay, pivot to pivot, do the axis, but all the axes are 0, so it doesn't make a difference. And I'll just move it to, like, I'm not sure, do I want to put it in the middle of the mag or at the base of the mag? I'll put it in the middle of the mag, and then the only thing I want to do is affect object only and just have it coming down. Okay, just hit P here, and there's the mag. And what I might do too is shrink this just a little bit, but make it wider like that, so I get this nice big triangle I can grab. Okay. So the scope is not going to be exported with the weapon. The scope will be attached. But the thing you got to keep in mind is that the scope actually gets, if I were to export the scope here and then attach it, I'll show you, I'll simulate that here. Effect pivot only. This is going to be the pivot, and then when I align it, that's what's going to happen to my scope. Okay? So when I export my scope, I actually just need to move it here, like that. So I'll go ahead and do that now. And I'm just going to rename it, because scope 1 because I'm optimistic that I can make more. Okay, so and then that's the hunting rifle scale test, but I'm going to rename this to pickup mesh. Okay, so I want to do it as scope 1, save, yes, okay, and now I can just realign it back to the bone. Okay, and that's exactly where it's going to get attached. Alright, now, not skinning yet, but I'll show you guys that, it's easy. I'm going to take these two, and I'm going to hide selection, and I'm going to hide these. Okay, the two bullets are going to be linked to the mag. Okay, the bolt, the scope, and the trigger are going to be linked to the weapon movement. The bolt lock will be linked to the bolt, and the weapon movement will be linked to the root. So if I take the root, okay, the mag's got to go to the, that's the only thing I forgot, to the weapon movement. Okay, so now if I move the root, everything goes with it. If I move the mag, it's the mag and the bullets. If I move the weapon movement, it's the whole gun. Okay. If I move the bolt, it's got that and that, and the trigger's by itself. Don't need to move it. Notice how I can move these even though they're linked. That's why that's the second reason I like to use object as bones instead of actual bones, because just to illustrate really quick, I'll take a bone here and let me move this. Yeah, it doesn't, it wants to rotate the back piece. See what happens? It makes sense because it's saying this is a bone in an organic creature. Bones do not move. In order to move it, I'd have to unlink it. See? That's why I like to use pyramids, because they're just objects and they're not trying to simulate like you know, an actual skeleton which can't detach. Like, go ahead and take your forearm off your bicep and and feel good about that. Okay, so unhide all. I want to say no to the other layer. Now it is time. This doesn't need ever to be skinned, okay, but I do want to keep it on here visually so that if I do an aim view, I want it to line up with his eyeball. I did mess up in my export because I think I forgot to add another material for the second ID. You can see here that it's still got ID 1. I mean, it's actually using a second ID, but it's because it's using the same material. UDK won't recognize it. So I'll have to fix that, but that's not that big of a deal. And now this can get the skin modifier. And we come here and add bones. And if I just drop it all down, okay, you can see there's my hierarchy for my whole gun. Root, let's pull that into view. Root, weapon movement, okay, weapon movement controls everything else. The bolt and the mag go to weapon movement. Lock goes to bolt, the bullets go to mag, and then the scope and the trigger are separate, so they just go to weapon movement. And we add that. Now, there's two ways to actually do this. You can hit edit envelopes, or you can just click skin here and it pops it up. I do want to go by verts, and this is a mechanical object, so I want select element checked. Okay, and what I like to do is go weapon movement, select all. Now here's the thing. This is another weird thing that can happen. I'm going to go ahead and drag that up, give myself a little bit more room. I just want to illustrate this. Absolute effect is what I'm going to play with here. If I drag across here, I can type in no problem. Okay? But if I hit Control A, sometimes, well, the older versions of Macs, it's still letting me do it. The older versions of Macs will sometimes tell you, like, this will be grayed out if you just hit Control A on all your verts. If that's the case, just drag across the whole thing. If that does happen to you, if this gets grayed out, just drag and you should be fine. Okay. So that's the whole weapon is now controlling the whole gun. Or the weapon movement is controlling the whole gun. Weapon root gets skinned to nothing. Okay, it's just there as a holder. Trigger, just click the trigger, okay, because I have select element picked, all I got to do is just click one of the verts. Okay, you can't click a face, by the way. You have to click a vert. And then I just come here and hit 1. So there's the trigger. Scope needs nothing skinned to it. Mag, I just need to pick a vert on the mag. And if I go to wireframe here, you should see, it's kind of hard to tell until I move the camera around, but you can see that these are all selected in there too, because it is in fact one element. And just put that to 1. Okay, bullet 2. Okay, here's the thing. Bullet 2 is not part of the mesh. Now, I got two options here. I can attach them and skin them, no problem. I can keep them separate and attach them in code, and I'm going to say no problem with big quote fingers in the air, because it's not that it's not a problem, it's easy to do, it's just I got to get, my coder's going to have to do it, and he's going to have to remember to do it, and there's really no reason for him to do it. So I'm going to attach the bullets. Okay, let's come back to the skin modifier. And the cool thing is nothing's broken. So bullet 2, let's just click here. Just click on the bullet. You can see it gets all of them. Absolute effect of 1. Bullet 1 would be this bullet here. Absolute effect of 1. Bolt lock is this plastic piece. Okay, that gets an absolute effect of 1. And the bolt itself is actually this, this, and this. And I don't think that there's anything else in there. And I set that to 1. Okay, just click off a skin modifier. Let's check the trigger. It works. You see the mesh goes with it. Let's pull the bolt back. Okay, works no problem. That's all by itself. So one of the things I can do is, because here's the thing, like this has got to come up, right? And then move back. But this, I don't want to have any rotation to it. So what I can do is, there's two ways to do it. You can go to link info here and you can inherit no X. And what happens is, now when I rotate that, notice how it stays. However, if I rotate it this way, it goes with it, which means if I rotate, but here's the problem. If I rotate this around, notice what happens to it. It's not inheriting the X rotation. So you see how it's totally breaking. Okay, so I do need to inherit all my rotations, but what I can do is I can constrain the orientation to match the weapon movement. Okay, and what I can do is I can just say keep initial offset, and now when this rotates, it stays, and when this rotates any direction, it sticks with the gun perfect. Okay, you see that? It's nice and clean, and that's how I want it. So this will go up, back, okay, and then forward and back down. All right. Now, the scope again is not going to be skinned to anything, because, and it's actually going to stay a static mesh. It's never going to need to be a skeletal mesh because nothing in it bends. If there was something in the scope that had the dial that could be turned, like actually be turned, or if say there was some cables or something that you wanted to kind of wobble when the gun moved around, or you wanted to be able to flip open some covers, you know, the caps, the end caps, and you wanted to be able to have them pop up, this would need to be a skeletal mesh. But in the case that it doesn't, all I really want to do is just do constraint, link constraint, and pop it here, which means it now moves with this, But this officially, if I hit H, is not actually linked to anything. Okay, it's not really linked. It's what I call a soft link. Okay, this here, a link, the constraints I call soft. The hierarchy, which you actually affect here, I call the hard links. Okay, so this is a hierarchical link. This does not affect hierarchy. It's just kind of like a max script in essence. It tells it to follow it. So that's what I want to do there. And now if I rotate the whole gun around, no problem. I can move the root around, no problem. Okay, now I need to get it in his hands in a proper position. Okay, so this is the setup. Save that. Show my mesh. What I want to do is I want to take this root and I want to align it to his wrist control bone. Okay, I have a B_weapon socket bone, and all of the roots of all of my weapon objects go to that exact point. Okay, they stay there. And then what I can do is I can take the weapon movement bone and put the gun wherever I want it, and that will be in relation to the weapon socket, where his hand actually is, where his wrist actually is. So I'm thinking about there. Feels pretty all right. Okay. Once that's done, I take the weapon. Okay, I'm trying to click through, but it's not working. I take the weapon root, move it back to 0, 0, 0. Rotate it back to 0, 0, 0. Was the rotation of this really 0? Yeah, it really was. Okay, I was just wanted to make sure of that. Okay, weapon root here. See how it's in relation to the whole gun? And you see how the gun's going to export? Like, it's going to be like that. It's going to be weird. Now, if I didn't want the gun to be exporting at this funky angle, if I didn't want that to happen, I can actually fix that. But I personally kind of don't care because it makes no difference. It gets socketed into his hand. It gets oriented to his hand. It's fine. In fact, when I put this in his hand, it's actually pointing up. I need to point it. I need to angle it down. But in this case, I could realign it back here. If I did not want that to happen, what I got to do is I got to take his wrist and I'm going to have to rotate it down. Now the thing is his wrist is currently following the weapon socket. So I need to actually delete that and put that to Euler. Okay. Now I'm going to go by local, which I got to remember that that's happened. Okay. Now I want to take this by view and rotate it straight. Okay. And now I kind of need to do this slight magical balance between his wrist and the gun. Okay, I like to do this by local so I don't end up doing some kind of weird. So what I'm looking for here is just having the correct downward angle. So what I'm actually going to do is in world view, I'm going to zero everything out. Okay, and now I'm going to flip it 180. And now I'm going to get the angle, okay, which I'm kind of trying to match his knuckles correctly. And once I do that, I think I'm okay. And now the gun can just be moved, not rotated. That's the thing. I need to move. I can't rotate the gun because I've called it, right? I'm officially concerned. I don't want the gun importing or exporting at a weird angle. I need to keep it straight. The hand's got to match to the gun, not the other way around. So that looks about right. And now what I can do is on this particular animation, which may be different, I can go ahead and redo the orientation constraint. Animation constraints, constraints, orientation constraint and put it back here. Now it's going to flip the hand over, it's going to put it back to 0, 0, 0, but that's easy. Just keep its initial offset. And now when I move this around, the hand goes with it. You can also see the other hand's going with it too, because I have that all linked up. And now all I need to do is take this weapon root, animation, constraint, link constrain to my weapon socket. And now he's holding it. Okay, I just got to fix those fingers. And he's holding it. Okay. The other thing that I want to do that I don't have control over quite yet at this point is I want to give myself the ability to move the arms. And remember, these are bones. If I move the arms, look what happens. The whole thing goes, and that's borked. So what I'm going to do, in order to move bones, you can move them, by the way, without having to delink them, but you need a control object. So I'm going to make a sphere here, and I'm going to align it pivot to pivot, all axes, and orientation. And I'm going to name this right arm control. I'm going to make a dupe of that, and I'm going to call this left arm control, and align it here. Okay. Now, this can be kind of weird. What I want to do is I want to do animation constraint, link constraint, which doesn't break my hierarchy, but it tells it to follow it, and I want to put it to this arm control. Notice what happens. It breaks. Okay? So I'm going to undo that. The reason that it's doing that is because this is actually being associated by the root bone, which is this little guy here. It's being associated to that. So when I tell it, hey, now orient yourself to the coordinate system of this thing here, it like offsets wherever this thing is. And that's why it moves it. I don't exactly know what's going wrong with the math, but I do know the fix is just to simply remove the link here. Just unlink it. Now you can see that it breaks, but no fear. Just go to animation, constraint, link constraint, put it back to the sphere, and then relink it. I fucking hate when that happens. Relink it. Okay. See how that's happening? Okay, well now it didn't happen that time. And then it just goes right back. And now I can move this. Notice the oddity of what's going on here. See what's happening to the root bone? That can and will freak you out the first time that happens, and you're going to be like, oh shit, you know, what the fuck is going on? Drove me absolutely bonkers when it was first happening. I was so worried about it. I was so depressed. Not really, but I was just like, oh god, now I don't know what to do. You know, doing this should work, but it breaks. So I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm just going to export it and see what I get. This stretching of this bone is only like a visual thing. It has absolutely no bearing on anything, okay? Is it weird? Oh yeah, it is weird, but it doesn't matter, okay? So I need to do the same thing here. I need to unlink this, unlink, animation, constraint, link constraint to the sphere, and then relink it, son of a bitch, relink it. I think I did nail it there. So now if I move this, notice how nothing goes with my root bone, because these are static, and look what they do. Also notice how this doesn't move at all when I go up and down, but if I go forward and backwards it does. It's almost like it's saying, hey, I see you, I know you're cheating, you know, and it's like Pinocchio nosing you. It's just the stretch, the pivot, the rotation, the scale. Like if I show the scale here, it's 100, 100, 100. I'm going to move this, and I'm going to pick this, look at the scale, 100, 100, 100. It doesn't actually change anything. Like I said, it's just a weird ass thing. So now that's it. Like I'm officially ready to animate this bastard, and I should have an easy time. Like if I feel like my wrist is kinking too much, because like say this is like here, right? And it's making my wrist kink. Well, I can just move it back, just unkink the wrist and put this wherever I want. These never get seen. The camera point is right here. Okay, as long as these are below the camera and whatnot, I'm fine. Now, I'm just going to put that back because it's actually fine where it is. Okay, and it actually, in essence, this is his collar. Okay, the camera's kind of there. You want to tune this for where your camera is. So what I've done is if you right click down here, or actually, yeah, if you right click right here, you can go to layout and pick the two here. Change this one to camera, change this one to perspective, and hit OK. Okay. Now, if you go to your render setup here, you can actually figure out, okay, well, I'm going full screen, 1920 by 1080. Okay, I'm not going to render anything, but this is giving me the proportions here, and all I got to do is come here and say show save frames. As you can see, the hotkey for that is Shift F. Okay, and it's even still got the animation in there for me because this is what was animated. Okay, and you can see, like, if I look here and then hit F4, and I try to keep it realistic, you can see that now I can move this shit around wherever I want and just be like, well, I can't even see the gun, so let me move it up, you know? It does feel kind of weird. Let me hit Alt W here. I think that's the realistic shadow. Yeah, it's just a shadow. The shadow happened to be the same color as the background. It was just kind of throwing me off. Okay, so maybe I'll just turn off realistic because that is throwing me off. And now I can position this hand wherever I want. Bones try to rotate by local. You don't always have to. Also, you don't necessarily want to have also you'll see that I'm actually grabbing the hands, and I can grab the arms. Okay, if I hit F4, you can see I can grab the arms. So what I'm actually going to do is go Object Properties, make sure this is unchecked. It will come in checked, just uncheck it. I had already done it, that's all. And just freeze them. Okay, and now I can't accidentally select here. Now let me show you another trick. I want to get this whole finger, okay, or say I want all the fingers. What you can do is you can actually select all the roots. Now I'll just show this here like on one. If I pick one bone, it's kind of hard to see. Let me hit J so you don't see any of that. So it might be a little bit hard for you guys to tell because of the color of my bones, but see how this one's white and this one's blue? If I hit just page down, it actually cycles through the children, but if you hit control page down, it selects all the children. So if I want the whole hand, I can select the wrist and hit control page down, and I get 21 objects. Okay, and then if I want to get rid of these hand bones or whatever, I can just alt get rid of those, and now I can, like lock in a keyframe or something, because if I want to make sure that I'm animating this correctly. So it's a very handy thing to have that tool. So if I want to position the pinky, I can rotate, like this bone, just hit page down, rotate, hit page down, rotate, or I can select this and hit control page down. If I make sure that I do each one's pivot, I can actually unfurl the finger or curl it, all of them at the same time. Okay, so just page down, and I'll just curl these up. Now you'll notice that it looks like my skin weights are all broken on this mesh, and they are on this mesh. Okay, but I've already fixed my actual export mesh. It's just that before I realized that this was broken, I had already exported I'd already done a bunch of work, so I just fixed the actual the skin mesh in the game, and the mesh that I use for animation is still the same old one that I've constantly been using. Sometimes I don't want to do the page down thing, but for here I will, because you do have to lift your hand off the keyboard and stuff. Kind of don't like that. To be honest, I kind of want to. I think I kind of want to turn the hand a little bit more forward. Now I'll show you guys what's going on. Why is this hand stuck to the gun? Like, why is that? The reason is two things. The IK helper is actually link constrained to the same weapon socket, which is this big blue guy. Okay, that's a link constraint. The wrist is orientation constrained to the weapon socket, so that's why that follows it. Now, what it means is if I really want to reposition this hand, and I kind of think I kind of do, the link constraint doesn't interfere with anything. I can move it around, no problem. Okay, I can still move it, and it'll still follow. Okay, you can see if I drag the animation, it still follows. However, I cannot rotate this. It's not doing anything. Okay, that's because of this. So I haven't really figured out a great way to do this yet. Like, I can't say like the weight is 0. I still can't rotate it. If I set active here, now I can rotate it, and then I'll put the weight back to 100. It put it back. See what I'm saying? So even if I say set active here, so that, hey, now I got rotation, I still can't do it. The orientation constraint is kind of a dick. And I don't know if pose to pose allows me. Let's see, is that still following it? It is still following it, but one of the things you'll notice, if I pay really close attention, notice how this hidden line right here is crossing right on that vert. Look, it's not touching it anymore. It's not touching it anymore. It's allowing for movement. It's not a totally hard lock. So what I tend to do is I just go, hey, you know what, get out of here. Delete the bitch, and then I'm going to turn the hand a little bit more forward. Move the hand more like that so it's more forward, and that will allow me to have what I feel is a more natural thumb position. Remember, you got to kind of do it from this view here. Also, the hand actually needs to rotate up just a little bit. Just a little bit. Probably like that. Okay. Other fingers I'm not worried about. And now once I'm happy, assuming I'm happy, I can reattach the orientation constraint. Now, Control-Shift-O is my hotkey for that. Okay. And then when it flips over, you keep the initial offset. Okay. And now again, I'm re-locked on there. Now the cool thing is I say like, well, I feel like this wrist is crimping. I can move this. It ain't crimping anymore. You see what I'm saying? So now if I look at both views, it feels a little bit better. And I can further, I mean, even up here, you know, or maybe I want to move it so like right there so you can see the scope. Okay. The FOV on this, by the way, should match your game's FOV. And actually, our game, we changed to 90. So you can see what that does to my view. That looks like shit. So I actually need to move this back. Okay. But notice what I've done with by just moving that, if I want to actually get the pose fully back, I can just move this weapon socket and these two, and see now I'm just literally shifting that mesh forward and backwards and everything stays clean. Now I may want to pull this a little bit up and have it be a little bit out like that, but it won't show in the camera because the camera's view is coned out like that. So as long as I don't pass that cone with anything that I want to stay hidden, I'm fine. Okay? I'm totally fine. I'm losing my camera is like if I zoom, you know, if I hit Z on the camera, it like wants to fit the whole cone. It's stupid. It doesn't just zoom to the camera itself. So if I want to zoom in on this, I can just hit that. And again, my idle animation is so super simple. It's just that's all you want, you know. You don't want it going all crazy. Now, some games, like after like you know, say 2 minutes or 30 seconds or something of being like idle, he might do an animation, and in that case, sometimes you might want to call that idle animation, or you call that bored animation or something, where he pulls a gun up and kind of looks at it, or he pulls the bolt back and inspects the chamber and then brings it back down. You know the whole thing, like where Sonic the Hedgehog, if you just sit there and you don't touch the controls, after a while he looks at the camera and starts tapping his feet, or sits down, or goes, falls asleep or something. You could do that if you wanted to. No real issues. You can do as many of those as you want. Just randomize them. You can see how I'm passing through the mesh, but it doesn't make it any difference because it looks okay here. Now I just want to fix my fingers. Again, they're not really going to be all that in view. I just don't want them looking too weird. I want them to look like they're actually gripping the gun. Okay, I mean my real hands, my real one-player hands are higher res than this version. They have nails and stuff. Like when you play the game, it's a completely different hand. This is just like I said, the overall thicknesses and stuff are the same though. To be honest, you don't even need these meshes in here. You don't need this mesh. You don't need the arms. You don't need the hands. You could just have the two skeletons in here and animate it 100% fine. It will work, but it's just going to make it so that you don't have like that good of a visual ability to see what's going on, So I'm just going to try to make that do its thing. Now another thing I could try, it doesn't always work though, is left elbow control. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to align it to this elbow. Okay, and then what I can do is if I go here to IK, and I think if I select this object or this bone, one of these bones, I could have swore it was this one, or maybe it's here. There's a way to set a goal object. I can just like never remember which bone down the chain you gotta pick or what. I could have freaking swore that it was this, maybe here. Okay. Pick target. Yeah, so you pick your actual chain object, your control object, and you go pick target, and if I pick this, what happens is now when I move this, you see what happened? The elbow follows it. It doesn't matter if I move it off. It's just kind of like always pointing at it, and it's just a handy thing to have. Elbow controls. Okay. So I'll make this right elbow control, and I'll align that here. I'll pick this object here, pick target, boom. Okay, and now I got elbow control. Okay, and now it's actually also a wise idea to take the elbow control and link it to the actual bicep control, not the root bone. Now the reason that I did a hard link and not worried about like a link constraint is because I can still move it because they're objects. Okay, so it's not going to rotate this or do anything weird. But now this controls it. Okay, and it also means I can actually take this and rotate it if I want to. It's not going to give me a lot of influence, but the thing is I don't tend to move these around too much. I only in situations where I need it. Okay, so like this, maybe I want to have like that. Now, you know, like I said, it's completely broken in terms of where are the arms in relation to like real world. This is a totally different story if you're doing the kind of animation where you're animating the whole three-player character and you're sticking the camera between his eyes and you don't have one-player arms. You can't do this kind of thing. You just can't, right? You can't just take his shoulder and move it off his body because other people are going to see that. But in the case that we're doing it here, where we do have a separate one-player mesh, and we're not looking at the whole, you know, we're not just putting the camera on the three-player guy's forehead, I can get away with this. That kind of animation is actually technically superior, technically more difficult, and technically better. Like I said, still superior, right? It's a better approach in terms of quality in the final result, because the players can look down and they can see themselves and everything's working. They can, whenever, you know, they vault over something or jump, they see their feet, you know, and it's more immersive, you know. It's like Mirror's Edge and Far Cry series, those games all do that, you know. You get to see that. But it's more difficult because what happens is you got to worry about where the head's looking sometimes. So you need to run code to tell the head, like the camera, to be attached to this point on the body, but not accept its rotation. Because if in three-player view, this is just assuming that you can actually see yourself from a three-player view. If you can't see yourself from a three-player view, to be honest with you, your character doesn't need a head. You know, you just need to put the camera on top of his empty neck because he doesn't see himself. But if you can walk up to, say, a mirror and you'll have a reflection, or if you're playing Skyrim where you can just wheel mouse back and then all of a sudden you can see yourself, you're not in first person anymore. In that case, you need the head. You need to make sure that the camera is in a position that isn't going to clip. You don't want to see the inside of the head mesh, right? And sometimes they do certain tricks, like once it actually goes into first person view, they hide the head mesh, or they shrink it to -1 or even 0. They shrink that bone so that the head just kind of basically disappears. A lot of games do that for headshots. They'll spawn like a gibbed head mesh, and then what they do to the actual mesh that lost its head is they'll scale the head bone to 0 or -1 so it flips inside the body. That was old school Quake 2 method of doing it. Or they just even flip the head bone, like, hey, you know, headshot animation is just spin the head and neck bone 180 so it's inside his chest. And it worked in those games because the character's chest was freaking huge. You know, the characters were bulky, and in a real human, your head, you couldn't really put that in your own chest from front to back. You know, your head tends to be wider than that, unless you're a larger person. There's a million different shapes of people, right? A billion, trillion different shapes of people. But for the, you know, the normal average, you know, let's just assume like a 15-year-old kid who's, you know, skinny kid, normal kid, right? Just picture any one of them on the planet, cut his head off and stick it inside of his chest. It's not going to fit facing front to back, so you can't do that. In that case, you'd have to scale it to 0, or you have a material separation on the head where you can say, okay, I'm going to set the alpha channel on this thing to 0. But then now your mesh has to be translucent or masked. It's no longer the opaque version, and you're having a little, you're adding a little bit of overhead, having translucency calculations and things like that, opacity calculations on a skeletal mesh. It'll be a little bit more expensive than normal. Not a ton, but yes, it will be more expensive than normal. So like I said, it depends on what your approach is on how you do it. The overall linking and moving around, and even having the ability to have these elbow control bones and things like that, that's all stays the same. But in this case, I only want to make sure that my my like wrist isn't all crimped up all crazy like that, where it looks like that. Like that, I don't want that, So having this control is really great. Okay, I can just fix it. I can also actually fix the, I can twist this too. Okay, so I can fix that. Same thing here. Now the reason that this can twist is because if I go to IK, it's not active in any axis. If I make it active in these axes, well, I can still twist it. Rotate. That was actually sliding joint. Rotational joint. It's actually going to see how it's actually bending it, and you'll notice now that I can't do anything to it. But this is just a forearm twist bone, so I don't want any activity on any of these axes, and it actually straightens it out when you uncheck the Y. See how it's broken? It's like he broke his arm. Because remember, IK is just trying to make a chain. If you do a whole bunch of them, it tries to make a curve. Okay, so you can take certain ones, and like for instance, you see that only the Y-axis is active here. And if I zoom in, it's kind of hard to tell, but you can see that the Y-axis is the one pointing to the side. Z is down, X is forward, Y is to the side. Y is red here, okay, which is now yellow, and that's the axis that it can rotate in, because the elbow doesn't twist any other way. Okay, it's a one-angle joint, If you turn, when you twist the other way, that's not actually happening. This is actually a ball joint. Okay. The one thing it can't do is, I forget, roll or twist or skew or whatever. It's like a two-axis joint here. So yeah, that's the setup for how it's going to be. And again, when I go to export the weapon, now weapon root, so I'm actually going to hit a save because I want to be safe. Okay, now all I got to do to export the weapon is just take it and move it to 0, 0, 0. The weapon is doing nothing, it's just sitting in the scene. My arms are controlling everything. And then I go to rotation by view, it's still 0, 0, 0. Now all I got to do is hit control page down to get all the bones and include the mesh, not including the scope. And what I want to do now is export as an FBX, because that will take the bones, and I'm going to call this Hunting Rifle One Player Mesh. No animation. I pretty much keep it like this, but I'll try tangents and binormals. You do want smoothing groups for sure. Triangulate, I don't know. Edge orientation, I don't really know. But I know going into UDK you want binary 2013. You can go lower than that, but you can't go 2014 as far as I know. And it's going to tell you, hey, it doesn't support the following object types, and it's going to convert them to meshes. So what? Doesn't matter. Okay, they're not going to show up because they're added to the skin modifier. Okay, and then when I'm good and ready, I can actually just take any bone on here and just keep tapping page up until I get to weapon root and just realign it right back here, and I'm back to where I was. And if I go to UDK, which I'm going to open, okay, in UDK I can just import one player FBX. Okay, said okay. You can see it's here. Okay, no scope. If I show the bone names, they're all there. See that? It's all there just fine. Alright. And now what I can do too is I can go back to Max, Character. Now I have a saved selection set, but all I did was take the root bone, which is all kinds of weird, and just hit Control Page down. I get 52 objects. If I go to Character here, I get 52 objects. Now export this, okay, and I'll just do this here. I'll just do hunting rifle animations, anims. I'll call this FBX anims 1 player. Okay, I'm going to call this 1P idle. I want animation. I'm just have the bone selected. Okay, 0 to 100. I don't have sample all checked. Hit OK. Tells me, hey, weapon socket's a weird type because it's a pyramid. If anything's going to be lost, but again, it's just a bone, so I don't care. Okay. Now, what I can do is come where my character is. Character soldier. Here's my arms. I'll create a new anim set. I'm going to go wep_h hunting rifle grouping anims, and I'm going to call this hunting rifle 1 player anims arms. Actually going to swap that. Arms anims. Okay, you can see it comes in T pose, and you can see the difference between the mesh here. Okay, it's a higher res mesh. Go to anim. I do want to go to anim set and say uncheck anim rotation only, and now I go file import FBX animation. Okay, hunting rifle FBX anims 1 player idle, and there's his hands. Okay, now what I can do is if I go to the socket manager, I've already got a weapon socket. Go back to the content browser, come to my weapons. Where the fuck is it? Right here. Go to mesh, skeletal mesh, the 1 player mesh, and preview that. Now here's the thing. It's like, oh god, broke. No, it's not broke. Don't worry about it. The reason that happens is because it's effing stupid. I think I have a screwed up setting in my exporter. But if I go to this mesh and I double click it, one of the things that you'll notice is the rotation origin is actually not at default. Okay, so it wasn't pointing down the X. See how it's pointing down the X now? Okay. Now it's not correctly in his hand. Relative location and rotation are correct. Let me check and see if there's any kind of origin shift or anything like that. Ah, okay, here's the problem. Apparently, it's oriented here, okay? Which it shouldn't be. It should be oriented, oop, not that bone. I want this guy's root. It should, oh wait, actually no, I want to move the root first. So let's page up until I get to the weapon root. It should be oriented here. I thought I did that. I think the reason that it comes in rotated is because, and I'm not entirely sure, I haven't played with it, is I think that I need to flip that to Z up. but I'll just leave it as is for now. And let's check. Let's re-import. Interesting. It's still there. Origin. Interesting. It's possible that it has to do with, and I'm not entirely sure why it's doing this. It hasn't done this to me before, but it could be that that is the problem. But it really should be right there, so yes. I don't want the animation, by the way. Oh, I think the animation was moving it, so I'm not really sure. Let me uncheck the animation. I could have swore I had that unchecked the first time, though. There, it moved it. It's not showing it moved, though. Let me reopen it. It did. I saw it move here. That's weird. Yeah, it's moving it. It needs to be... See how it's putting the trigger right at his wrist? It needs to be forward. I don't know why that's happening. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to hit Control I, and I'm going to delete everything. Weapon root. That moves that. Okay. Just deleted everything else. Let's try this again. There's something weird going on. Just make sure I don't have any kind of shifting or anything like that, and I don't, that I know of. That's weird. I almost want to say it's glitching because this is the root, but the root doesn't have any, oh, well, it's not added to the fucking skin modifier. Hang on. Is it? Wait, yeah, weapon root's right there. B weapon root. It's right there. It doesn't have anything skinned to it, though. Like, just out of curiosity, I'm going to see if this has any effect. I'm actually going to skin the main body of the weapon to the weapon root, which isn't going to be good, but see how it moves it? Which means that I gotta dump the skin modifier. Oh, can't dump it. I'm gonna actually, here's what I'm gonna do because I want to not have to do that again. Advanced parameters, I'm gonna save the skin weights, so it's gonna be called HuntingRifle skin weights.env. Save. Now I'm gonna convert this to an editable poly, re-add the skin modifier, add the bones, these are all B underscore, okay, and then load the skin weights, match by name, hit OK, which should mean that my like my bolt pull and stuff like that are still good. Okay, and now I just want to edit the envelope so that my weapon root controls the whole gun. Now let's see if that had anything to do with it. Unfreeze all, get rid of that. Now it's moved. And solidly in his hands. So let me go to the weapon movement and see if that really was it, or if it was the fact that I had the arms and everything still in the scene. Because it's never done this to me before. I apologize if it seems weird, because it does to me too. It's still okay. It must have been that there was something left in the scene. I think once I deleted those arms, I don't know. I mean, this is what it's supposed to be like, right? It's supposed to be oriented right there. So that when you do this, it's in his hands, you know? And even if I hit play here, it'll follow his hands clean. Okay. So it's good. Anyways, I don't know what that was, but anyways, so now that I'm set up, my mesh is set up and everything, I should actually be good to basically animate this thing through its paces, which is not that many for one player, and I do actually have to do 3-player too, but I'm probably going to skip that because all it's going to be is me taking a bunch of my own animations that I've already done, putting the gun in his hands, fixing his hands, and exporting it, and it's just going to be mass production. So because I already have a rifle set of animations, and I'm just going to basically mimic those, but I do need to make sure that his hands and everything are actually in the right spot. So